Hey, good morning, all. Josh is Severe Weather. Happy Tuesday to you. Tons of stuff going on in the tropics, believe it or not. Although right now in the United States, we're in pretty good shape. We'll have to keep an eye on next week to see if we still could have some potential trouble that gets a little bit closer to us. But the bigger story for us in the U.S. is going to be some big changes in temperature coming as some much colder air is set to move into the U.S. gradually. It's going to take some time to move east. In fact, probably well into the start of next week before we start seeing that cool air move in. But certainly something we're going to be keeping an eye on here towards the end of October. And as the calendar flips over to November, some big changes are coming. First, let's talk about tropics. And the main concern right now in the Atlantic is Hurricane Tammy, a 75-mile-per-hour hurricane. A lot of uncertainty in the future of Tammy. There's going to be a setup where the storm is going to get drawn back to the west around an area of high pressure, and then another trough is going to move into the North Atlantic, and Tammy's going to face one of two potential paths. It's either going to get picked up by that trough and go near or over Bermuda and then eventually get kicked away. That was the original thought. Or it's going to miss the trough and weaken some and then take a path more towards the west, which means we need to keep an eye on some of that moisture towards the Bahamas and Florida. Now, if it escapes and that trough picks it up, Bermuda could have some stronger wind and storms with it, or heavier amounts of rain, but it is going to be a stronger storm as it moves away. If it does miss the trough and head westward, it is going to enter an area that's less favorable for a stronger storm. So if you're seeing that one arrow pointing towards the Bahamas and Florida, yeah, obviously keep an eye on it. But right now, I don't think it's going to be a very significant storm if it does take that track. If anything, it could weaken some more as it does that. So we're going to be monitoring that. And that turn potentially is going to be towards Friday and Saturday. So we still have a few days of uncertainty before we start to see what happens. We did have a tropical depression, number 21, that formed right before it moved into Nicaragua last night. It is getting ready to pretty much lose that spin, but it could try to redevelop as it moves away from the Central American Pacific coast and into the Eastern Pacific. And we have Tropical Storm Otis, which is now strengthening and likely to become a Category 1 hurricane. Hurricane warnings are now posted for the Mexican Riviera as the storm is going to potentially make landfall or come very close and kind of ride the coast here in the next couple of days. So that's the Atlantic and Pacific. We have more on the other side of the world I'll talk about in a little bit. Here's a look at Tammy. Winds are 75 miles per hour. Oh, sorry, I thought I had that loaded for you guys. The storm is now moving northeast, so actually into an area away from land, but it is expected to stop and kind of make a turn back towards the north and maybe towards the northwest here in a couple of days. Winds are 75 miles per hour. There's some wind shear that's keeping Tammy from strengthening. It could still strengthen a little bit more, but looking a little bit less likely it's going to be a stronger Category 2 and more likely to be a stronger Category 1 at this point. And we have Tropical Depression 21, winds just 30 miles per hour, moving northwest at 6 miles per hour across Nicaragua today, then into Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala here over the next 36 hours. And here's a look at the basin, and you guys can see on the infrared, Tammy is the biggest storm on the map right now, growing in size, but not growing in organization. Still producing some heavy rain here over parts of the northern Leeward Islands, the Netherlands Antilles, the British Virgin Islands. We have Tropical Depression number 21. You can hardly see it on the map here, just a ton of disorganization, already beginning to lose that spin over land. And we have strengthening Tropical Storm Otis, which is going to be a potential threat here towards the Mexican Riviera here in the next 2 to 3 days. There's a few models, and I'll show you in a little bit, that keep it just off the coast, but close enough to cause problems. Others that bring it just inland where it would weaken at that point. Looking across the U.S., we do have the remains of Norma producing lots of clouds, some showers here over parts of North Texas and Oklahoma. And those high clouds spread all the way into Georgia and into the Western Carolinas today. So a very big, deep feed of moisture coming in, but not a ton of rain with it at this point. All of the action is actually up across the upper Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the UP of Michigan, all getting some showers and storms here this morning as a strong northern branch of the jet stream picks up some of that tropical moisture and sends it across the northern part of the country. Other than that, we've got a big trough getting ready to push into the west, kind of in phases. We've had the first phase already move through. Here comes the next phase. And as that digs into the northwest, we're going to see colder air coming down from Canada and pushing that trough down and allowing much colder air into the western U.S. here in the next few days, where it was so warm just a few days ago. Looking at the Caribbean, the Gulf is very quiet. The Western Atlantic is quiet. Here's Tammy spinning well to the north now of the islands. You can still see some heavier bouts of rain over portions of the British Virgin Islands and Northern Leeward Islands on the tail end of Tammy. That's going to be a challenge here to deal with in the next couple of days. We do have Tropical Depression 21. You can hardly see the low-level center anymore. It's kind of like right in here. Just flare-ups of showers and storms. I think this is going to get downgraded pretty quickly today. And then on the edge of the map, you see Tropical Storm Otis, which is beginning to intensify. So we're going to take a look here at the Central Atlantic because behind Tammy, we have to keep an eye on some showers and storms, which right now are not in a favorable spot to develop into any kind of tropical system. But there's always a chance here as wind shear weakens and we head towards the beginning of November. The waters are still warmer than average. Remember that. And that's why we saw storms down here in June and why we're seeing them in October. And it's possible we could still see one in November, although I'd imagine it would be a weaker system if it were to develop. The next two names on the list are Vince and Whitney. And there's probably about a 50% chance that we get a Vince between now and the end of the season. I'd say a 20% chance that we get to Whitney, and then after that we go to the supplemental list, but I don't know if we're going to get to that point. Here's a look at Tammy. Still a well-defined system here. Hurricane producing some rough surf here. You can see dry air on the western side trying to get entrained into the southern end of it. That's keeping it from strengthening at this point, so it's holding serve and it's growing in size. Here's Bermuda up in here. Bermuda's got some stable lower clouds moving in from the north, but eventually we're going to see the moisture from Tammy heading northward. And you can see on the infrared, no signs of a strong eye developing. We do have obviously a bit of an eye underneath all these higher clouds, but certainly the storm is starting to grow and the outflow is growing. And we are going to see kind of a backwards S track here where it strengthens a little bit more here up to 85 miles per hour. And I would not be shocked if we saw 90 or even 95, probably towards Thursday morning. Then after that, the storm moves into cooler waters. It is going to bend back to the left. As it misses this first trough, high pressure builds in, then we wait on another trough. And the National Hurricane Center does have it on Saturday morning just north of Bermuda. At this point, if you see these triangles, it's actually going to be post-tropical due to the fact that the waters are cooler. But even if it is post-tropical, it's still going to produce tropical storm conditions, winds over 50 miles per hour and some heavier rain here over Bermuda. After this point, that's when we start to see the split. The schism and where the models are going. Some take it off to the right, others continue it to the left, and we're going to have to just keep a closer eye on that. It's kind of a 50-50 chance right now. So the Hurricane Center is still going off to the west. That's where I have it right now. But you can see models that were trending in that direction yesterday have now turned right back to the right. And obviously not an easy forecast, not one that I'm going to say there's a high amount of confidence in, because if you look at 10 days, you see that there are ensemble solutions anywhere from the Yucatan Peninsula to southwest of the Azores, which is about a 4,000 mile difference in 10 days. So a lot of uncertainty, but you can, if you follow the means, you follow the trends, you can see, generally speaking, a bend back towards Bermuda, and then the control model turns it to the right. The deterministic model turns it left and then loops it back to the right. And the ensemble mean does something similar where it is turning left and then making a turn back to the right. But at this point, most of the solutions are showing blues, which are pressures that are going to be closer to 1,000 millibars, which would mean it would probably be a tropical storm or an extratropical storm. The European model says kind of the same thing. It's turning left, but it is either kind of stalling and fading or trying to turn back to the right. There are obviously solutions here that show some different possibilities. But if you're in Florida at this point, the one thing I will say that is certainly encouraging to keep this away, there is a big front that's going to move into the area early in November. So if something hangs out down here and the front moves in, it's probably going to sweep it away from Florida at some point. So that's what I'll be watching for you all. Intensity forecast, we still have a couple of models that try to get it back up to category 2. But generally speaking, it's going to be peaking in about 24 hours and then beginning to weaken again in 48, and then down to tropical storm strength in about 72 hours, which is 3 days from now, which would be Friday morning. The icon model is the most consistent model. It doesn't mean it's right, but it shows the storm turning back to the west and coming by just south of Bermuda here Friday morning. You can see Bermuda's right here. The stronger winds are north and west of the center. And then the system weakens significantly, and it's barely a tropical storm as it moves west-southwest. So that's encouraging for those of you in the Bahamas and Florida, in that this system is going to be a lot weaker. I don't think it's going to re-strengthen due to higher amounts of wind shear and some drier air in place. If you look at the European model, And now you can see the European says it's going to kind of weaken significantly over Bermuda. There's a ton of dry air coming around the base of this trough that's digging down towards Cuba and the southeastern Bahamas and Haiti. And all this dry air here is going to be very detrimental to the future of Tammy if it tries to move back in that direction. So the moral of the story here is it's either going to try to keep going west and southwest and fade, or it's going to get kicked back to the right and maybe have a chance at surviving in the future. But a lot of uncertainty still. All right, we'll look real quick at Tropical Depression 21. Here you can see the center moving inland over Nicaragua, heaviest rain over parts of Costa Rica. At this point, just a flood threat, but as the system emerges in 2 days off the El Salvador coast, it could try to become our next Pacific system somewhere down here in the Gulf of Tehuantepec, but that's not going to be until the weekend or early next week. It may follow a track, though, pretty close to Otis here, so something to keep an eye on here in the Mexican Riviera. A very busy month of October in Mexico. I don't think we've seen one this busy. You can see Tropical Storm Otis, and then we see this disturbance with a 20% chance of reformation over the next 5 days. At that point, it's probably going to be down in here and moving away from Central America. Here's a look at the satellite from the Pacific side. Here's Otis. Here is our depression, if you even want to call it a depression at this point. But Otis obviously is growing in size and turning to the north and west. And you can see it's got the look of a system that's going to continue to strengthen, likely into a hurricane, and maybe even rapidly into a Category 2 hurricane. I would not be completely shocked if that happened. It has about a day and a half to still do that, with impacts coming probably on Thursday morning or late Wednesday night. And then it pulls away to the west, and we have two camps, one that takes it along the coast. Rather than sitting on the dock of the bay here, it's actually not wasting time, moving away quickly to the west, or it's moving inland and weakening and producing flooding over Mexico. But either solution is possible at this point. We do see the intensification here into a hurricane in the next 24 hours and then weakening by the time it's affecting land. And then that's what we'll be watching here. 3 other storms here on the other side of the world. Yemen is getting now Tropical Depression Tej, producing very heavy rainfall here. No longer a wind threat, but an extreme rain event for southeastern Yemen and southwestern Oman. Some of these folks picking up 5 years worth of rain potentially here with this one storm over the next 2 days. But it has weakened significantly. And you can see on the infrared, the wind shears kicked in. The low level circulation is down here. All the thunderstorms are off to the east. We do have a storm that very quickly developed yesterday and has now become cyclone, very severe cyclone Hamoon. That is actually heading towards eastern Bangladesh and into western Myanmar. Winds are up to 90 miles per hour. It's possible to strengthen just a tiny bit more, but a very significant amount of rain coming here, a big flood coming for eastern Bangladesh and western Myanmar, unfortunately. This area was hit back in May, so it's been a while since we've seen anything in the Bay of Bengal, but here we go in October, dealing with yet another severe system. And in the South Pacific, we have a Category 4 cyclone, Lola, which is about to move into Vanuatu, and that is going to weaken when it does it, but definitely going to cause some major issues here with heavy rain and powerful winds hitting the eastern islands here of Vanuatu in the next couple of days. So that's a look at the tropics. That's a big look. Here's a look at the United States. And let me go back to today. We've got a big ridge building into the east. Yeah, it's a chilly morning here in the Carolinas. We may see a little bit of frost here this morning, but a very fast warm up coming today. One of those days where you go from the heat in the morning to maybe the AC in the afternoon. You see in the west, we've got 2 features, upper level low digging through the Baja California and a strong trough moving into the west. These are going to run into the ridge and fade pretty much. We're going to see all the cold basically get shoved down into the Rockies here, into the high plains, but the warmth actually intensifies. We have this death ridge of high pressure over the southeast. This is Thursday morning, and this is going to lead to a more unseasonably warm pattern and a drier pattern here in the southeast and in the mid-Atlantic region right through this weekend, while the west is going to be very active. You can see eventually this trough makes some inroads and moves through the central part of the U.S., and it's a strong one. We're going to see much colder air coming in by the end of the weekend, all the way down into the western Gulf states. But the heat does kind of hang on just a little bit longer, maybe all the way to Halloween here in the southeast. That's the day of potential transition next Tuesday. By the time we get to November 1st, Wednesday, it will be cooler than average across the entire eastern United States. And we could see some lake effect snows due to all this cold air pouring in over the lakes Tuesday, Wednesday, and early on Thursday. Meanwhile, the west is going to heat up and we see a complete flip. So wait about 9-10 days, the pattern completely shifts. And then we're going to see that warmth eventually move back to the eastern United States here for the second week of November. So we see one cool week and then another warm week, and we're just on the roller coaster at this point. Here's the European operational model. Big area of high pressure in place over the east. We're going to stay dry for most of the east, except around the Great Lakes and northern New England, a few showers moving through in a couple of waves. Heavier showers and storms, maybe some stronger storms here over parts of Texas and Oklahoma, and then heavy snow over Montana, over the Rockies, and over North Dakota here over the next few days. This storm is going to kind of get shunted off to the north and east. All the action is going to really be across Canada. In New England, we're going to escape most of the weekend without significant rain. That is a first for us for a while. But you can see this next boundary is going to drop down on Sunday and produce some rain Sunday afternoon in western and upstate New York and eventually into northern New England, whereas the mid-Atlantic is going to be pretty darn mild and pretty nice here. We may have 80s getting all the way up to DC and close to Philly here by the end of the weekend. Next week, though, that front drops south. There's timing challenges. The European shows it happening on Tuesday. The GFS is a little bit quicker. The Canadian's a little slower, but look at this cold air wrapping in behind it. We could see a coastal low bring some rain up to the Maritimes by the middle of next week and some lake effect snow here and chilly temperatures all the way down into northern Florida and the Gulf Coast here by the middle of next week. We have a marginal risk for severe weather in two spots today, one the upper Midwest, the other in parts of the southwest of Texas. And there is a small tornado threat as well in southwest Texas and southeastern New Mexico. So there may be some storm chasing going on for some down there. Not a huge outbreak expected. Tomorrow, things shift east. We have another wave coming up through the mid-Missouri Valley and a wave across parts of central Texas and southwest Oklahoma. And then the threat for severe weather is going to be less as we get past Wednesday here across the central part of the country. Temperature forecast, I mentioned and alluded to it before, a lot of warmth across the central and eastern U.S. right on into the start of the weekend, but at the same time, a lot of cold coming down over the weekend in places like Montana. We got fresh snowpack. We've got that cold dropping in from Canada, and temperatures could be as much as 35 degrees below average Fahrenheit. So if the average is 60, it's going to be in the 20s in some places in here on the front range. You see that cold does relax a little bit, but it also expands. And here's Tuesday morning next week. Will be much below average across much of the state of Texas up into the Great Lakes, still well below average in Montana. But here's where the battleground is here next Tuesday. We still have much above average temperatures here on the East Coast, a little bit longer. Eventually, it's going to turn colder and we're going to see a big drop. But the big question mark is, when does that drop happen? Could be as soon as Monday night, could be as late as Wednesday morning next week. So it is definitely happening. It's just a matter of how sudden that's going to happen. And the second part of next week looks like it'll stay below average, but then moderating across the west next week. And eventually that warmth shifts east again for the week of the 6th. And snowfall totals are going to be pretty significant across the Northwest and the Rockies in the mountainous areas, and eventually in central Canada and into northern Quebec here by the 31st. And look at this. A blend of the model shows potentially a little bit of snow all the way down into New Mexico, western Kansas, maybe even scraping the northwest panhandle of Texas. We could see a little snow in parts of Iowa and Minnesota as well. And then eventually we're going to see lake snows as we get to next Wednesday and Thursday, and that will start piling up in the favored belts here of the Great Lakes. So winter's not far away, even though it's going to be pretty warm here the next few days. Winter is not that far away. And of course, I'm going to have more for you guys in the coming days. So I very much appreciate y'all's time. Thank you. If you are a subscriber, I do have a membership channel, $9.99 a month if you wish to support me, or if you want to make a one-time donation. If you feel led to, I'm not going to beg you, of course, but it does help out. And obviously, if you're newer to this channel or you're stopping by and you liked what you saw, then please consider subscribing. I thank you all so much for your dedication and your time here. My goal is to continue to help you guys plan ahead for bad weather, to help save lives in any way that I can. Obviously, follow forecasts and watches and warnings from the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center and the Storm Prediction Center. But I'm here to give you the big picture on everything. I can't do it all, though, unless I have God on my side. I learned that about 10 years ago. I tried to do everything myself, tried to be successful. I was putting my worth in the wrong things. And thank God that I was able to accept Jesus Christ as my Savior. And now eternally, that's all that really matters. My gift to you guys is the weather. My calling is to share my faith, in my opinion. And it's my channel, so I feel like I need to just kind of give you guys the backstory. Until I was 30, I did not believe in God. I was in a very dark spot in my life. I'd lost my job. I just had to kind of rethink myself. But doors opened. I was able to just understand that there were some bigger plans in motion for me. I didn't see them at the time, but now I have seen them. And what I did was I had that downtime between jobs where I was able to sit down and understand more about how God's kingdom works and what matters the most. And Matthew 6:33 and 34 says, "But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought of the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof." I was a person who just worried so much about the future and what people thought about me. And I think that's just human nature to do that, just to worry about things we just can't even control. I mean, honestly, worry is just a down payment on something that may not even happen. So faith over fear. It's a struggle a lot of us deal with every day, but just know that we serve a great God. He has given his son Jesus to die on the cross for us to live eternally. That's a gift that's given to each of us. We have the option, of course, to accept that gift. And if we don't, then the future is not as bright as it is when we do, in my opinion, in my belief, and in a lot of people's beliefs. And there are many acts from the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament that show that faith in action, that people did choose to believe. And as a result, their lives changed eternally. I pray that that's the case for you as well. If it's not, I'm not going to judge you. This is not a Bible beating session. This is just what I believe and what I truly want for you if you do accept that gift. So I'm happy to pray for you no matter what your situation is. But I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday. And I look forward to talking to you all again tomorrow morning. God bless you. See you then.